welcome everybody to our inaugural Future Club. Thank you very much for coming along. Also like to say thanks to the RA who helped organise the event, and thanks to Amnesty as well for giving us access to the room that we're all in now. So, what do you want to get out today? So hopefully we're going to have a really inspiring time. Hopefully we're going to learn a whole lot about blockchain and what you guys can do with it. But really, what I'm really hoping that we get out of it is that we move from that warm step of inspiration and get into the perspiration part. We need to get to the point where we're doing the hard yards, which actually gets us kind of building this stuff. We want to stop doing all the talking about it, inspiring you guys, and get us actually going. So, my name's Rich. I'm the Managing Director at Three-Sided Cube. Three-Sided Cube are a company that builds technology for good. Basically, we want to leave the world a better place than we found it. And we've had some success doing that through our mobile applications and our hazards platform that we work with the Red Cross, and we've sent millions of notifications around the world warning people about impending disasters and things like that. So where does Future Club come from? So Future Club is an internal thing that we do at Cube. And we get the guys together on a semi-regular basis. Sorry, Greg over there has a big hand in. And we look at various different technologies that are out there and look at how they're going to impact the world in the near, middle and kind of distant future. And by far the one that got everybody talking the most, and everybody the most excited, and everybody thinking was the one we did on blockchain. And we started to look at blockchain and we started to research more about it, and looking into how it can have impact in the world, where it's going to disrupt. Obviously, massive disruption in the financial world. And we were looking at different places that it's going to disrupt as well. A real obvious one for us was the third sector. What we can do for charities and NGOs and that kind of thing. So we thought a bit about that, and we thought we'd test that out. So we took it along to IFC. So you guys go to IFC? Cool. IFC, it's an amazing event that's held every year. It's the one in Amsterdam we went to in October. I was absolutely blown away by what an inspiring thing it is to be at. Full of inspirational people. Can't wait to change the world, want to know how they're going to change the world. So we thought we'd go there, talk to them a little bit about blockchain and the effect it's going to have. And we went out there and we weren't quite sure how it was going to go. And we had the event that was kind of one of the later ones in the day, and we were thinking, people have had a long day of this, maybe they want to get to the bar, that kind of thing. And we were blown away by the response we got to it. People were really super engaged with it. And what we got out of that session was that people could see how this technology is going to change the world. People could understand the potential for it. What they really struggled with is how do I engage with it? How do we take this potential and turn it into reality? And that for us is like, that's exactly what we want to do all day. So it's really, really exciting for us, and that's why we've set up Talk, Walk, Run, which we're going to be talking a little bit about later on. So, what we want today to be, we've got 4 fantastic speakers for you, and we've got panel sessions later on. What we don't want to be doing is just stood here talking to you guys about stuff. So, we want it to be very, very interactive. You guys are on your tables. After each talk, you're going to have a bit of time where you can discuss on your tables the content of the talk that we've just had, and then do a Q&A session with the individual speakers. And then after that as well, we're going to have the panel session where we get all the speakers together and we've got a chance to have a real discussion and get to the bottom of the stuff. If during the time that we've got the sessions on, if you can think of any questions you really, really want to ask the panel at the end, you've got some post-it notes on your table, so it'd be great if you could just capture those questions, and if you can stick them up on the boards to the side, that's fantastic. You've also got on your tables some bingo cards. So any new technology, there's a whole world of jargon associated with that. And just to check that you guys are listening to what we're talking about, if those terms come up, if you tick them off, fill in the whole card, shout house, and there's a free bottle of champagne for you. So, just to make sure you're listening. So what we'd like to do, so we've got, as I said, we've got some great speakers. So we've got Rhodri from CAF. Rhodri is going to be talking a little bit about kind of introduction to blockchain, what it is. We've got Satya from Giveth, going to be talking about the incredible stuff that Giveth are doing in the sector. We've got Cecile from Blockchain for Good, who's going to be talking about blockchain and digital transformation. And then we've got Duncan, who's going to be talking a bit about Talk Walk Run. First up is Rhodri.
Hey, I'm Rhodri, so I'm head of policy at Charity Foundation. I also run a thing called Giving Thought, which is our in-house think tank. And just a kind of brief bit of context about why I'm here talking to you about blockchain today. I've been doing some research on cryptocurrency and blockchain and implications for charity for about 4 years now, which I kind of fell into it more by kind of accident than judgment, getting interested in Bitcoin back in 2013, and then subsequently done quite a few reports, a lot of research and looking at the various ways in which the technology can be applied to charities, the way they operate, and the way donors are able to give and fundraisers. So I'm going to give you a bit of background to what blockchain is, what I think the key interesting features are from a charity perspective, and some of the kind of exciting possibilities that it brings up. So hopefully this will answer one of the things there. So first of all, what is blockchain? There we go, brilliant. So, I mean, the explanation, if you kind of go online and Google it, you'll probably see pretty quickly what it's distributed public ledger. What does that mean? So basically, it's just a record of the transaction and ownership within a system. That doesn't sound particularly exciting. One thing that's important to know right up front is that blockchain is not the same thing as Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is one use case of blockchain, by far the best known one. But the point is that the underlying ledger technology can be used to record all sorts of different things. It just so happens that the best known blockchain was first developed for Bitcoin. I'm not going to go into how it works in any detail, partly because we don't really have time, partly because it would probably be quite boring, and also I don't really think that actually from a charity point of view you necessarily really need to know that. The important thing, as with a lot of technologies, I think, is to understand the key features of it and how those apply to what you do in your job. So why should we care about a technology that's fundamentally about bookkeeping? That sounds very boring. Well, the reason is that actually trustworthy ledgers are incredibly important, not just in finance. So in, I think, around kind of mid-1400s, they invented double entry bookkeeping in Florence, and that laid the groundwork for kind of modern finance as we know it and gave us accountants, so we can all be very thankful for that. But the thing is that, subsequently, if you think about it, trustworthy records play an enormously important role in all aspects of our life. So just some examples of the ways in which we rely on trustworthy records up here: to own a car, to be able to have a job, to get social security payments, to own a house. All of these things rely on you having records in one way or another, and at the moment that means that you need a third party of some sort that you trust and empower to maintain and update those records on your behalf. So actually, a fundamental change in the way that ledgers work could be a pretty big deal. So what are the key features of blockchain technology, and kind of why do I think these are interesting? So one is that it's distributed, so that's kind of it. There isn't a centre to it, you don't have a third party in the middle. It's like double entry bookkeeping, but without a bookkeeper, or everybody's a bookkeeper, basically. It's public. Not always, there are private blockchains, but let's assume for the purposes of this that we're talking about truly public blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's immutable, so once you put something on a blockchain, unless it's the blockchain that Accenture we're talking about, which was very silly, you can't actually change it after the event because of the way the mathematics works. It gets more secure over time, and it's incredibly difficult to go back and alter something. It's incredibly secure as well. Again, the sort of cryptography that underlies it makes it much more secure than traditional ledgers. It's universal in the sense that you can put all sorts of things on it, and it can be accessed by pretty much anyone who kind of wants to download that blockchain. And it's inherently digital in the sense that it lends itself to recording all kinds of assets very easily and kind of seamlessly, so non-intangible assets, non-physical assets, digital assets. So what does it enable? And I think this is where we kind of get to the meat of it. What do I think are the things that are interesting about it and why they're relevant to charities? So one is decentralisation and disintermediation. And I think this is the one slide, unfortunately, that's gone a bit haywire. Another one is radical transparency. And I'll come on in a minute to explain what I mean by these things and some sort of examples of the kind of opportunities and challenges. Third one is that assets and value of all kinds can be recorded, not just financial value, but pretty much anything you would want. Smart contracts, again, I'll explain for anyone who doesn't know what those are a bit more about that in a minute. And then the last one is it can fundamentally transform models of governance. Okay, so you'll notice I quite like the pun title, so just bear with me. So in terms of decentralisation, what do you mean? It means that you don't have to empower somebody in the middle to kind of manage that ledger. Therefore, you could do away with lots of intermediaries like banks, lawyers, governments, and if you think about the context, say, of international development, where you have these huge chains of value with all these sorts of actors in them, if you could strip out a lot of that intermediation, that could have a massive impact. The good side of that is you could potentially overcome the erosion of trust in institutions. So if those intermediaries are people like banks who've suffered something of an image crisis in recent times, or lawyers who've had an ongoing image crisis pretty much forever, not involving them could be good from your point of view as a charity, because you don't need to rely on people trusting those institutions. It could reduce transaction costs because you're not having to pay these people lots of money to do things like move money across borders. And it can remove geographic barriers. Cryptocurrencies aren't linked to any one specific geography. So actually, you can move Bitcoin anywhere you want in the world. Seamlessly, you have to pay FX costs, and you don't have to change it into other currencies. So actually, for charities operating internationally, that could be a huge boom. What's the bad side of this? Are charities themselves intermediaries? Well, in a sense, they are. They're intermediaries between people who have assets that they want to put to use for good and people who need them. So actually, if you're talking about disintermediating, what does that mean for the charities? And so could they be bypassed? Oh, there we go. So radical transparency, to explain what I mean by that. So the reason that blockchains are fundamentally more transparent than most systems we have today, if you put an asset on the blockchain, you kind of create a cryptographic identity for it, a marker that's unique. The one technical bit here is non-fungible. So basically, I can't take one of those and swap it for an asset of equivalent value and not notice. If I've got £10 and I give one of you, I swap it for £10 that you've got, nobody really cares and nobody need know. If I've got a Bitcoin, well, first of all, I'm very rich, I've got one Bitcoin. But also, if you've got a Bitcoin and I swap it with you, we would know, we'd be able to see, because those are two unique and non-fungible digital objects. So if you think about this in the context of charities, donations, I donate something either in cryptocurrency or enabled on a blockchain, I can track that all the way through a charity, potentially out the other side, all the way through to an end beneficiary and beyond. What's the opportunity? Well, that could enhance trust and drive further donations and grants, and this is the theory behind quite a lot of applications of blockchain to charitable giving currently. I also think there's potentially quite a lot of risks to this. So there are some quite fundamental questions about how positive a thing transparency is. So I think one thing is that it could really drive problems with people already kind of relying on unhelpful metrics. So if a donor is able to see exactly where it is that their specific donation goes, then they will say, and they don't have better measures in terms of social value, they will turn around and say, I don't want any of my money to go towards back office services or overheads. I want it to go to the mythical front line. And actually, if they're able not only to say that, but to to potentially set a smart contract that means that you literally can't use that money, the challenges that charities already have with funding core costs could get even worse. I think also around both donors and beneficiaries. So donors, there are some circumstances in which donors want to remain anonymous. If you're an aid funder, say USAID, and you're trying to fund things in a country where you are sanctioned as a foreign funding agent, you probably don't want, the Russian government, for example, to know that that's where the money came from. And also the other way around. If you are giving money to support somebody working around gay and lesbian rights in Uganda, you don't necessarily want people to see all of the organisations or community groups that are getting that money, because then they'll have a huge shopping list of people they can go out and lock up. So I think you kind of need to think through whether transparency is inherently a good thing in all circumstances. In terms of, I think it's something really interesting for fundraisers around the fact that this is going to potentially create new types of assets. You might wonder why I've got a picture of these weird cats up here. For anybody who doesn't know, those are crypto kitties. So finally, somebody found a real proper use case for the blockchain last year, which was to create lovable little cats that are basically cryptographic Tamagotchis. Does anybody want to guess or know how much the most expensive crypto kitty sold for?
15 grand?
No, it was $113,000. And I actually had a conversation with somebody last year who sold one for 75 grand and was trying to give the money to charity and trying to figure out how. So the point is, this is a stupid example, although it actually kind of has some sort of interesting underlying stuff about the way the technology has been used to create tokens. But what it shows is in the future, there may be all kinds of assets that we can't even imagine at the moment that could be harnessed and put to use for funding charities and the good work they do. And we probably, as charities, need to have the kind of foresight to stay on top of that and tap into these community pools of donors. So, yeah. So the range of assets fund can massively increase. So coming back to smart contracts, one of the other interesting things about blockchains is the degree to which they can enable automation. So a smart contract is basically a computer protocol that's self-executing. So it's basically like you set a series of conditions and say, if these conditions are met, do this thing, and it happens automatically. Why that's interesting, so I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I've written quite a lot about this. I think there's, we'll probably hear about this in the presentation after. The idea of you could set up smart contracts for giving, so you could specify, if these conditions are met, give to the most pressing needs at any one time, give to this range of organisations and this range of causes. Why do I think that's actually a realistic possibility? Because I've had people say that's stupid, nobody's going to automate giving and take humans out of the equation. Well, one thing is that in the future, when we've got an Internet of Things, so this kind of huge network of smart objects, autonomous vehicles, Wi-Fi enabled kettles, all this kind of thing, they are going to start interacting with each other without us having oversight, and there's going to be a machine-to-machine economy, which is going to consist of very, very small value, very high volume transactions. If we want to harness some of that for charity, which I think we should try to, the only way is going to be through some form of automation. So actually, smart contracts and machine learning are probably going to play a huge role in that. If anybody is interested, I have mocked up some instructions for a philanthropic washing machine. That's how we operate. And I think I wrote a manual as well, so I can tell you that one. And then coming to the governance stuff, and I think we'll hear from the guys who give it about this. It's all about, one of the key things of blockchain is about decentralization, but that doesn't just apply to systems. So it's not just about stripping out the middleman from systems. Actually, you can decentralize organizations themselves, so you can decentralize governance models. So this is the idea of a distributed autonomous organization or decentralized autonomous organization. So basically what this is kind of networks of individuals or sort of subgroups, nodes, who can coordinate and act at scale, but without the need to create a traditional centralized intermediary. And the reason that we have charitable organisations in their current form is because we got to a point where with most social problems it was impractical to try and address them without having centralisation to make decision making and logistics work. But what if in future you can use the technology to enable people to do exactly the same thing but without the need for centralisation? At the very least it raises an interesting challenge, which is what are the bits about centralisation that still add value in that context? So, I've counted through it and I've got to the end. So just some key takeaways. What should I remember about this talk? Blockchain is a thing that exists. If you take nothing else away from this talk, I hope that is going to stay with you. It's not science fiction, it is happening now. Everything that I've speculated about with blockchain, I've subsequently had somebody get in touch and say, yeah, we're trying to do that right now. And some of this stuff I thought wasn't going to happen for at least sort of 5-10 years. It could change the ways in which people are able to give, both in terms of the assets and the transparency and the automation. It could offer new ways to address causes, and we'll probably hear some more about that later in terms of the kind of tech for good applications. It could change the entire nature of organisations, and that's sort of decentralisation of governance structures that I was talking about there. And probably...
I'm interested in how it starts and finishes in the real world.
Yeah, so I think at the moment there is a big first and last mile challenge, which is, I think if you're going to use blockchain at the moment to try and harness donations, you've got a couple of choices. One is, do you take donations in cryptocurrency? If you do, you kind of limit the pool of people that can use it, but you have, all of the benefits and traceability from before the point of donation, so that's great. Or you kind of allow people to give in normal money and fiat money, and then you turn it into something on the blockchain by using a token of some sort, so you kind of peg their donation and turn it into cryptocurrency. obviously you have no idea what's happened to it before that. And then also at the end of it, it's all very well kind of having this stuff in the blockchain or in Bitcoin or Ethereum. When you get it to the grassroots level in an emerging economy or whatever, that's probably not very helpful in terms of spending on real things in the real world. So somebody's going to have to turn that back into money in order to spend it. And so, at that point as well, you lose all of the possible benefits in terms of transparency. I suppose there's a kind of bootstrapping argument, which is do the maximum bit you can in the middle at the moment on the assumption that more and more, greater blockchain adoption and cryptocurrency adoption in the future means that you can start expanding out at the ends. But yeah, you're right, it is a challenge at the moment.
Cool. You guys?
Ours is kind of a combination of the two, so just how can we, sort of as we're doing a track and trust where donations go?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I suppose you be able to see it. I mean, how you would actually do it would just depend on the specific platform and kind of how they'd implemented it. And really, I think most of the challenge is to kind of hide all the blockchain stuff in the back so you don't have to bother with it.
Table at the back there, do you guys have it?
So ours was relatively cynical by nature, I guess.
Okay,
because we
cool.
don't
It's
know
good.
what it
It's
is.
good to hear.
I'm interested in the application of kind of the wider, I guess you call it digital strategy, and how it fits in. But I guess you kind of answered that by saying it's something that people don't necessarily see, something that just kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So it's like part of a platform. It's not the end. It's not its own entity. And also the other thing, the other sort of consideration we have is who in your organisation actually is like more of a cultural thing, but who is like the owner of this?
Mm.
I.e., do you get an outside agency to implement this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think on that one, yes, absolutely. This stuff should, it should fundamentally be quite a boring technology in that it's quite back office, and with lots of other things that we're perfectly conversant with, like email. Actually, the way that works is a hell of a lot more complicated under the bonnet than it looks when we're using it. And I think this stuff will really start to work for charities and other sectors when they can use blockchain in that way, and where I don't even need to know it's got anything to do with blockchain. At the moment, I think we kind of sit here and put the technology front and centre because it's exciting and people want to talk about it, but actually there'll be a sort of long tail of use cases when it starts to really prove its worth. Sorry, just remind me because I went off that. What was the second bit of your question? It was just
kind of the cultural.
In terms of who owns it within an organisation.
Yeah.
I think, in practical terms, certainly for charities in the short term, it's going to be about partnership. I don't think there's any I don't think it's likely that most charities are going to get in-house, developer expertise to start building things on the blockchain themselves. I think there is still a job to be done about bringing together the worlds of the people for the tech sector who kind of understand the way these things can be built and the possible applications, and the people who understand the real-world use cases. Because I think otherwise there's a real danger of very enthusiastic people from a tech background creating solutions to problems that don't exist. Because I think that happens too much. Just a quick sidebar, I'm involved in some discussions with, off the back of a House of Lords report about putting together a kind of, they call it distributed ledger technology because they hate the word blockchain, but blockchain for charities working group, sort of looking at cross-sector implementations. One of the good things about that is they're looking at more boring things. So it's, actually it's good. They're looking at sort of distributed ledger technology for like charity regulation, which is great because I kind of think that's the sort of use case we need to start thinking about.
So, and it's an interesting point you made because that's exactly why we're doing exactly what we're talking about today. We've got a good understanding of the technology and how that can be implemented, but you guys have the real world problems and the real world applications that need to be solved. So much better to work in partnership than for us to go off the table and go, oh, this is the right thing, and then not make, rather than stabbing in the dark, it'd be better to know a little bit more about it. Cool. You guys got questions for Rhodri? Tough one.
I was just going to ask about any best case examples of charities or NGOs currently using this.
If I'm totally honest, I think there's been fewer real-world use cases than I would have expected. I don't think we've moved on enormously in 18 months in terms of practical implementation, there's been a huge increase in interest and enthusiasm. I think there is a real challenge over the coming year to find some meaningful use cases. I think people have built platforms and there are some kind of up and running. Most of them are minimum viable product or limited in some way, and they're still kind of, you know, at the same time as building the platform, they're kind of testing the concepts and how it works. There are some interesting examples. I know the UN's been doing quite a lot of work around use of blockchain for kind of digital identity to help displaced people to kind of maintain a secure record of their identity when they're sort of forced to move between countries. But on the kind of fundraising and giving side, I think there's been a lot more sort of talk than actual implementation so far.
I have one user case actually. I'm involved with the organization in the US called Wild to Marathon, and just 2 days ago they started the process of setting up a Bitcoin founding process, so you can donate to them with Bitcoin. So it's funny to see, but it's actually the small players who are actually picking up on it. They're not so big. They, I think, so far raised around 5 million altogether. They're buying land to connect biodiversity zones in Africa. So it's a really interesting concept, but they rely on small donations mostly. So for them, this type of fundraising is really important. So actually the woman, she told me like how amazing it is that you see the small people, the small organizations who really embrace it now.
It's really interesting. I'm surprised more charities haven't tried to tap into crypto donors, because it seems to me there's a potential huge pool of people out there sitting on all of this massive increase in value. And probably some of them feel a little bit awkward about it and would like to put it to use for good. I think the challenge for a lot of charities is it's quite easy to set up a Bitcoin wallet, and they could do that, but do they actually want to hold any Bitcoin because it's so volatile?
I think the fear of the risk involved with it and the fear of the unknown and that kind of stuff is probably.
I think that.
But you're right, the smaller organisations, they're the ones that are kind of that can move quicker.
So this is one of the reasons I'm here, because I'm trying to understand when it comes to this transparency, how long do you have to hold on then to the donated Bitcoin? Do you have any obligations to your donors if you're receiving Bitcoin donations? I don't think that's actually a case, right? In a way, you can quickly turn it into.
No, and if you took a donation in Bitcoin, so Coinbase, for instance, most people don't know, but like they offer a specific wallet, an exchange wallet for charities you can set up. So it will take donations in Bitcoin or Ethereum, it like automatically just turn them straight into fiat currency for free. So you can take Bitcoin donations, but you never actually have to hold any Bitcoin. But you don't get any of the benefits in terms of traceability. What's that?
What's that called?
Coinbase offer it. I'm not promoting or selling the. But interestingly, so Fidelity in the US, for their donor advised funds, sort of slightly high level donors, they've been taking Bitcoin donations for about 2 years. And I think this last year they had, I can't remember what it was in the region of like $18 million, might have been more than that actually going into it. So it's quite a significant source of revenue.